Thank you, Pat. Thank you, all the sponsors and our panelists and all of our viewers here this morning. So we are um, talking about something that market rate apartments, aptly named Awakening on Long Island, because for many years, Long Island has had about half the amount of market rate apartments than our contemporaries in Connecticut, Westchester, Jersey. Um, so we're going to go through here, and we're sort of like in a unique um, time, forgetting about the whole COVID thing for a moment, with news, how people get news, how we're qualifying what we're seeing and hearing, and we're finding that more and more we need, as the public, need to understand the cause and effect of things, not just a statement of something. And there's a couple of points in just doing some discussions with our panelists that I've learned, and I've been doing this for a long time. Um, so I'd like to, introduce a panelist, Chris Capece. He's president of the Heatherwood Luxury Rentals. He previously VP Development of Avalon Bay. He's got advanced degrees, MBA from Columbia University and London Business School. And I know Chris for a couple of decades here and worked very closely with him. We also have, which was very important to get on the government side, the elected official side, we have Mayor Dennis Seary. He's the mayor of Amityville Village. He lived there his entire life, which is like important when you're governing a village. You sort of have a real fabric in the community, and especially here today, where we're looking to facilitate change. It's always nice to know where the village came from. He was a former New York City firefighter, current lieutenant in the specialized marine operations of the fire department in New York, and he was first elected as trustee in 2011. So welcome. And we also have Peter Curry. And Peter, I also know for a number of decades. He's a partner at Farrell Fritz, specializes in land use and economic development, works on IDA procurement, bonds, grants. He's got his MA from University of Virginia and his law degree over at Fordham University. And I have the pleasure of dealing with Peter on a regular basis. He's the counsel for the Commercial Industrial Brokers Society as well. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for participating. So we're gonna kick this off on, we're saying the awakening. So what does that really mean? I know looking back 10 years, probably 15 years ago, was sort of like where we had a material change in how Long Island was viewing apartments. Originally, it was from the renter's side. Um, I think I used this example before. I got married and moved into renting part of a house up in Huntington Village, and I would much rather have lived in a modern apartment complex with amenities and clubhouse and pool and barbecue area if it was available, but it wasn't available 30 years ago. So I don't think the renters have changed. The developers have changed. I think they were the first to step in. And Chris, maybe you could speak a little bit about that tipping point that happened, 15 years or so ago, and what was seen, what were you guys doing, and we'll sort of slowly come up to where we are today.
Yeah, no, that's fair, Dave, and thanks to you and Pat and Stony Brook for having us on. I think really a couple of things happened, Dave, over the last better part of 20 years that actually helped the apartment industry start to accelerate in a way that it hadn't previously, or at least not since the 70s. One is that there was drips and drabs of success where those in various communities could see what new apartment communities could be, and the positive impact they could be for their local communities. And so, there was always this fear of the unknown. What are apartments gonna be? Are they gonna be Section 8, right? Is it gonna be low income housing or Mitchell Lama housing? And I think there's a sense that, once some of these, what we'll call new generation multifamily developments were built, there was a greater, broader acceptance, where they would say, hey, look at this great development that, TriTech has done in, new villages in Patchogue, or look at Avalon Bay in Rockville Center. And I think once that fear of the unknown was out of the air, or at least started to, be addressed, then you started to see some, acceleration in some other areas. The second thing is and Peter can speak to it as well as anybody, is intervention by the IDAs to say, yes, these are the types of development and economic revitalization that'll be critical to our communities. And I give a lot of credit to the IDAs, because as much as the village and town boards, sometimes come under pressure from, whether it's school districts or local civic groups, that, hey, this is going to change the character of our community. The IDAs were also under some pressure as well, because it was another discretionary approval that was required to make the development economically feasible. So I think those are, looking back, those were two things that were, very important to kind of, moving this type of development forward. And we're in a place now where, I'll tell you, my old partner, Matt Whalen, who's a great friend of mine, we often joke, that we have the slings and arrows of some of these developments way back when. But, maybe it's getting a little more broadly accepted, and it's not, the vitriol isn't quite what it was way back when.
Okay, so the one thing that we've seen is that the municipalities were big opponents early on, and now we've sort of slowly have them as proponents for all of this. Um, I know all the fears. The kids are going to blow up the school district. There's going to be too many kids, and the change in the demographic that Chris, you were alluding to, by having apartments. There's going to be people from Brooklyn and Queens moving out here. More traffic, right? Sewer. Every possible thing. The devaluation of my residential home. Um, and all of those have proven to be false, and more so, I think all of them proven to be just the opposite. Um, there are some issues that we still need to convey, but Dennis, maybe you could talk a little bit about, from your experience with other municipalities. I know you led the was it the Suffolk County Villages official organization or something? So I know I got that wrong, but
Suffolk County Village official.
yeah, I was close. Um, so what has made things change? What has made things change? So I know we're spanning 15 years or so, 10 years in what we're talking about, but I guess we have examples of successes. But in your opinion, what's changed, and what's changed for you?
I think it is what you're saying, seeing the actual results of places like Patchogue, Bayshore, where they brought in the extra apartments and people, and it helped out their downtown areas. And just that, I think Chris Capice, when he came along, he was with Avalon Bay at the time, and he was their representative. He showed a very good article that kind of put hammer down on everything that said the doom and gloom that never came, that, like you talked about 15 years ago, everybody was worried about, just like Chris said, all these apartments coming in, all these people, what is it gonna be? The unknown that killed people and scared them away. But then when we see the results of what we have two very good complexes here in Amityville, New Point Estates and Country Estates, that when they came along 15 years ago, I was on the zoning board, and I was kind of not, too hip on it, because I was afraid of the change. You have your small community that you don't want to see getting overpopulated. So I think we see that adding to that small community, but trying to grasp that, keep that small community feel within. That's where I think the government comes in handy with that, keeping that small feel with development. You have to balance it out. So I think that the big change is just seeing the results of past developments and how they have improved downtown areas, which is much needed. You need those feet on the street, and it helps. So I think that's the big change, just seeing the actual results, the doom and gloom that never came. So.
Right. So Peter, you could comment, because you represent a number of developers. And I remember years ago, the goal was sort of like, keep quiet, don't talk to anybody. Hopefully people don't see the notice to come to the zoning board, planning board, or the town board hearings. That's all changed. There's a whole new business out there, in your face and vibrant, and sort of leading the way with some education, before they really get into the big, looking at plans, looking at densities or whatever. Could you talk a little bit about that, on how the development side has sort of like taken advantage of, social media, has taken advantage of reaching out to civics and whatever?
And I think there was a tipping point where a development that Chris is very familiar with went in under traditional application theory, and social media had a lot to do with the project stalling. And upon seeing that, everybody said, listen, we can't be just defensive against this. We need to get out ahead of it and provide the story, and try to provide the story first. So in the work that I do in the IDAs, what you need to show is this is an economic move. It's people moving into a place. It's apartments. It's multifamily housing. It also has an effect on the economy. You need to show the positive effects on the economy, and that the negative effects that everybody's afraid of do not exist. So in addition to what Dennis was saying, you need to have a project that fits within the village, or fits within the area. But you also need to show that by the construction and operation of this project, you actually make Long Island come out better economically. If you think about what the IDAs were doing when they were dealing with only industrial, office, and other types of projects, they were saying, this is the economic benefit, but if people had no place to live, then they couldn't hire the workers, and then the economics of the project wouldn't work. But these are economic projects. When you show that by the construction, that every construction dollar results in $1.75 in the local economy, when you show that the operation of these, the spending by the residents, has an enormous positive effect on the economy, and then when you can show actual examples like Patchogue, or like the project in Lindenhurst, which, although it is not even complete yet, has resulted in that downtown leasing pretty much all of its unleased space. When you show the positives, then that's the kind of social media that you have. You also need to reach out to particular groups and try to interact with them. So we do reach out to school districts, try to have a dialogue with them, try to say, this is the reality of the additional number of school children. This is what the project will bring to your district economically. And a lot of times, because of the 2% cap, it's not as if the school budget goes up, but the taxpayers end up paying less, because while the budget only goes up by 2%, now the increase in taxes and pilots that you're making in that area make everybody else's taxes go down. It's one of those unknown factors that people, you can actually have your taxes go down by these projects coming online. And you just need to make these points over and over again. You need to make them in smaller groups. You need to make them in large groups. You need to make them in the newspapers. You know, Newsday is against pilots. It's against IDA transactions without really much of a reasoning. So you have to use social media to bring all of these things out. And it's not a 2-month process. It's a process that takes several months, a lot of meetings, a lot of negotiation, but you know, you're investing in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars in these projects. It's worthwhile spending the time on social media to let everybody know the benefits.
Right. So let me just, I just want to go over the school tax thing that you just said, because now that I know what it is, what you're saying makes perfect sense, but until I really understood it. So what you're saying is, if there's a new project that's going to add $5 million worth of taxes to a community, the way that the tax structure is set up now, your taxable base doesn't change, just that everybody that's in the base splits up that cost. So this, even though there's $5 million more going into the school district area, it doesn't go to the school district. The only way you could do that is if you allow, right, through state legislation or whatever, make some changes that if there's an increase in $5 million, that gets added to what the school can tax and not just get piled into what they're existing the pool.
One of the anomalies of the 2% tax cap as the state has, the regulations that the state has, is that if a property is on the tax rolls, the increase in assessed value of that property increases the entire assessed value and is added to the 2% cap, which means that your taxes can go up more than 2% over the prior year. They can go up 2% plus the increase in assessed value.
Right.
Fortunately, the way the state legislation works, pilots are not included in that. So while the pilot payments are given to the school district, they're still subject to the 2% cap.
Right.
It's an anomaly that really has to be dealt with, because the school districts would, this would make things a lot easier with the school districts and frankly, every other taxing jurisdiction. You know, because the school districts say, yes, well, you're giving me all this money, but I'm still stuck with the 2% cap and you're bringing in all these school children. Now,
Right.
we know the projects, the communities are not bringing in the school children, but it would be nice if all the taxing jurisdictions could see an increase in their taxable base for projects that have pilots.
Right, right. All right, and we're gonna, on that issue, we're gonna carry this forward back to the REI board to see what we could do to help with that, because, you know, that certainly, we have some structural impediments, and that's one of them. So we shouldn't have that on top of everything else. So the Real Estate Institute board is gonna take a look at that and what we can do as an organization going forward. You know, the other thing, we're talking about IDAs a little bit, you know, that's another area where there's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And, you know, I just recently looked back up on the New York State budget line items and looked in Long Island and looked at for the IDA money. And there's let's take Suffolk County, for example. There's a 65 times ratio from the amount of an IDA incentive, right? Times that by 65 times, that's the amount of private investment.
Well, I think I'll ask Dennis a question, and that is really that, and I'll use, I guess, Lindenhurst and certainly Patchogue as an example, where, you know, most commercial properties are taxed, where their assessed value is based on income. And so the income when the income for various properties increases, then their assessed value goes up. So a place like Patchogue, where the assessed value of all the surrounding businesses surrounding the TriTech project went up enormously. I think they're going to be seeing that in Lindenhurst, and I would think that Dennis will see it in Amityville. That you know, basically, when you take all these things, you say, okay, well, I'm making a lot more money than I did last year because a lot more people are visiting me. My assessed value goes up. I will pay more in real estate taxes.
Right. set of questions there. I agree, and I think people also have the wrong impression with the IDA where they think they're losing tax base, where you're not losing any money. I think that was a big thing with the Amazon and that was coming from Long Island City, but you're not losing money. You're just not getting the money that you would be getting right now, but for the future, which we have to think about, that money is going to be there along with the other businesses that come into the village and help it out because you have all these more feet on the street. So balancing that out in the community is definitely something we have to look at as a municipality. So it's the idea is definitely being helpful there.
Yeah.
Making these
Yeah, we need better communication. I think we need some buy-in from the media as well. You know, there's freedom of the press. You can print what you want. But we do need, and this is now going across politics, COVID, real estate, it's touching everything. You know, with Dennis, with the example you just used with Long Island City, there was a $3 billion tax benefit package, but the taxes were going to be $30 billion. So instead of getting 30 billion, that we are getting 27 billion instead of 30. It's not like there was a suitcase of $3 billion that you could spend someplace else. So we've got.
And the other thing I'd like to talk to Chris about for a second is one of the realizations that he may have had is who his target audience was versus what people thought the target audience was. So who are these renters, which is certainly different than Lyle has thought in the past.
Yeah, you're right. That's a great question. You know, for when we were doing our early examination, all right, and looking at demographics, I think we understood that we were going to get that millennial generation, which, by the way, now is a little bit older, and you're so, you know, some of the from a demographics perspective, some of the targets that we're looking at as developers are now more, you know, Gen Z and further down the line as those groups are coming out of college and coupling from single family homes with their parents, so on and so forth. But I think something that was very interesting for us was the evolution of, you know, multifamily apartment design for empty nesters. And we knew that was going to be a good percentage of our demographic, but probably not to the degree that we thought initially. And so even, you know, it's Heatherwood right now, you know, we're looking at how are we designing these apartments in these communities for a 55 and older, and how does that change between 55 and 65? What is that resident looking for from an entertainment perspective, from an exterior amenity perspective, from an indoor outdoor fitness perspective, now even in you know, what we'll call a new normal. So, you know, to your question, the empty nester is a cohort that we are very focused on, and one that we think, you know, there's some more there, even down the line. If you look at millennials' age, they're naturally going to go to, you know, single family homes in the suburbs. They're going to raise their children. They're going to go off to college, and then there's going to be a wave that's going to look and feel a lot like the baby boomer generation. And right now, that millennial generation is the largest living generation in the country. So you're talking about, you know, a significant, you know, wave that's going to walk through the time continuum.
So, you know, we keep hearing that we're still about 100,000 units in deficit of what we need here on the island. And I pulled a couple of statistics off of CoStar, and this is pre-COVID. So New York City had a 3.1% apartment vacancy rate. Long Island had a 2.8%. So we were tighter here than you were in, you know, hot Manhattan. But even statistically, 2%, 5% is ridiculously low. Um, but it just shows that there's, that there's still such a need here. And Chris, what you were talking about, the 55 and over, similar to my example that when I got married, I rented part of a house. There was no alternative. I think for the 55 and over, there was no alternative for them. They lived the rest of their lives in their single family home. And my parents are an example of that. My dad's 88, my mom's 84, and they live in a 55 and over community. And there's friends, there's a pool, there's a clubhouse, there's a gym, there's all the social aspects. There's help if they need help, with something. Um, so I think this will be sort of like self, feeding as more and more seniors get to know that there's an alternative that's better than living isolated on your on your own, trying to mow the lawn and plow the driveway. Um, so we're solving problems we didn't really even prepare for. The other thing is the divorcee crowd. If 50% of the population gets divorced, that's what I see is driving these rental numbers up. There's rental numbers here on the island. Chris, you and I were talking. I think like in Garden City, you're at $7,000 a month for for a unit in the apartment in Great Neck. But even in like a Huntington Village, we're $3,500 a month. So we're satisfying needs that didn't exist. It's not just the young people. We have to. That's part of what we're going to talk here because, that was sort of like the basis of the beginning of this was to stop the brain drain, keep the younger people here, which keeps the employers here. But we'll get into this. I just want to make this one point on the IDA, and we keep hearing like, okay, well, why does the developer need IDA financing, right? And we answer, hey, because that's what we need to get it to work. But there's a more fundamental reason. If you're buying, and a lot of these TODs, there's industrial properties that surround the train stations. So you're going from industrial to residential. That's a change of use, change of zone, right? So if someone's selling an industrial building, for $1 million, let's say, and he could sell it, close in, 35, 60 days, and you come in and say, hey, I want to put apartments here, but it's going to take 3 to 5 years, you have to pay now more than what he can get as an industrial property as an existing use. So you're paying more, and the IDA benefits are helping you make that work because of the time that it takes to get this done. If it took 2 weeks, then you could pay cheaper for the land, right? And IDA might not be such a needed component of this, but you guys want to talk about that a little bit? But I think people need to understand really why that matters.
Well, I've got to be honest with you. Even if the process could go more quickly, the economics are such that you just need all the benefits. And remember, there are other benefits involved also, which is a percentage of the mortgage tax being abated and the sales tax on the construction materials being abated, which turns out to be usually a fairly significant number that the developer sees up front, as opposed to the benefits of the pilot that he sees over the course of 15 or 20 years, which for financing purposes, somebody's going to discount the present value. They all go into a project. And sure, you could, you were mentioning the rental numbers, and yes, you could build these projects without a pilot, and you'd have to rent them at rental numbers that no one could afford. So what it really comes down to is even for market rate apartments, you have to have an audience, and they have to be able to pay for it. So if construction costs are going through the roof, it seems to me that construction costs have outpaced inflation and pretty much anything else for the last 10 years or so. I mean, the numbers are kind of ridiculous, and they only get worse during times like COVID, where your supply chain starts to break down. The developers, because of the 2 or 3 year process, and Chris could speak to this better than I do, but there's so many factors that can occur between the time you sign that contract and the time you actually close and start renting. you need some protection, and part of what the pilots provide is some certainty and protection about what the taxes are.
So, Dennis, is the Gray Barn development, is that in the village?
That is not within the village, no.
Not within the village, okay. So we, let's just move on here because we're talking a little bit about how things started, what was the target audience, what are we finding the actual audience is. We've started with suburban garden apartments. You know, we're now full blown into TOD, transit oriented development. And I was involved with the, I think the first discussions on the island for an EOD, which is an employment oriented district, for Melville, right, which is a mature 9 million square foot business park. And we've been going through the process. Hopefully we're getting closer to be able to incorporate market rate apartments within the office building park. The benefits of that obviously is similar to TOD, where a young couple really only needs one car, because if one of them, can walk to work, the other one drives to work, or you need a car for the weekends. So we're still getting cars off the road. Major employers, First Data was the last company to leave, I think about a year and a half ago, took 1,500, 2,000 jobs out of Melville and moved it out to, Long Island City or Hoboken. I think they might have went Jersey City. So do we have room for all of this stuff? We got TOD going into EOD, Smithtown, Hauppauge Industrial Park, Hauppauge Business Park is looking at the EOD concept as well. Do we have enough demand for all of this going forward?
So Dave, I'll take that one. So you touched on it, right at the start, which is, our multifamily housing stock on Long Island here is, roughly half of what it is versus our suburban peers in Northern Jersey, Southern Connecticut, and Westchester, right? So we know we're undersupplied. And that number is, I've heard anywhere from 100,000 to 200,000 units. So that's the baseline. So when you say, can we, the question is, can we absorb it? The answer is yes, we can absorb it. The other bigger question is, the pandemic has accelerated a trend that's been occurring in real estate in a huge way. The Amazonification of big box package delivery at your front door, and the need for bricks and mortar. And that can be argued to certain degrees, but I'll tell you that, single use on sites of that scale, I don't want to say that's a thing of the past. It certainly isn't, but is there an opportunity to mix uses in a way here that frankly other municipalities are doing in other parts of the country with much greater efficacy than we are here? And so, you look at the opportunity at the Melville Employment District to introduce some, mixed use with residential in there, where you have some vibrancy during the nights and weekends there, along with the office. There's plenty of office space there that's either dark, single story, or has long been gone by the wayside, and there's a higher and better use that can go there. Is there room for multifamily in that area? Unquestionably. You have access to sewers. What you don't have is you don't have the zoning in place that allows for the density needed to justify the value to get those land sellers motivated to sell. And that's a big lift. And that's kind of the critical juncture for us here.
Yeah. I think that like a good example of what you're talking was Broadway Mall in Hicksville. It's got a bunch of dark stores. It's walking distance to Hicksville train station. You have the mall there with the retail restaurants. Um, you know, Long Island has still been very resistant to that sort of Meisner Park, down in Boca type concept, where you've got office space, you've got, medical space, uh, retail with residential, um, City Place in West Palm Beach is another one that sort of has that whole concept going. And I think that would be a huge success, here on the island, even through, I'm telling you, I rented when we first got married in Huntington Village. I still live within a mile from Huntington Village because I like to be able to, the walkability of it. Sometimes we walk in, um, you've got the movie theater, you've got shows, Paramount. I mean, it's it's not something new in human nature to want all this stuff. It's only new on Long Island that we're being able to provide it. So, um, so one of the big things that have been holding things up has been land use. Even the EOD concept, there's been a lot of discussion. Um, one of the issues are some of these things, they span multiple, supervisor terms where you're dealing with multiple supervisors or county executives on certain things, and the things just don't really kind of move quick enough to actually get done. But Dennis, I wanted to ask you because we've been a full 10 years into the TOD thing, and we've got plenty of examples of success. And so you're sort of like, late to the TOD party here on the island over in Amityville Village, but it does give you empirical data from other villages on how it worked. So I wanted to discuss with the three of us, starting with Dennis, is what have we learned from what we've done over the past 10 years? Like, talk about best practices. Dennis, what are you now targeting and your residents are targeting and the businesses that are telling you that they want there? Just kind of go through the mindset a little bit.
Going through the mindset, we got, people, they want the people to come in, obviously. Everybody wants a restaurant here. We've learned from, like you said, from 10 years ago, we are a little bit behind the 8 ball at our village, which we were talking yesterday about that, and I feel like, I hope we didn't miss the boat, but I don't think we did, especially with the pandemic now. We're seeing that people can work from home, so I think we have like the second wave of this TOD district coming, and we see that reaching out to the community, I guess, we've learned from that, and letting the community be part of the whole process and give their a lot of input into what's going to go there and what we want to see helps out the businesses. They want to see all the businesses in town are very excited about all the residential units coming in, and they just can't wait for it all to get completed. And even people hearing about things going on, Avalon Bay coming in, we have Village by the Bay, the 115 unit complex, is having businesses come and look into the village and making us a lot more enticing for them to come in, knowing that we have all these people coming around. So I think we've learned that these things are very beneficial for villages to continue our growth between online shopping and all, which actually earlier we just on another call, and I can't believe it, they said that online sales only count for 15% of all sales, which I think that's, I don't know if I believe those numbers, but I think that's it. The businesses want to see these developments coming in with the residential units, and the people in the community want to have their input into what's going there. And I think that was very important, especially with Avalon Bay. We did a lot of the outreach to all different civic groups and all different groups. We worked, I thought we did a really good job of notifying the public what was coming. Like we talked about earlier, somebody mentioned, it used to be, let's try to sneak it in and hope nobody sees the notice, and here we'll get this unit done. It's not the way of the world anymore. Transparency is huge, and letting people know is 90% of the battle. Letting people know what's going on, what's happening, get their input, and take their input and use it, put it into the project. It helps everybody, and I think that's crucial. That's one of the things we learned.
You said something to me when we spoke before that you now have businesses coming to you trying to locate in the village before the cost of everything goes up and they can't buy buildings or rent buildings. So they're anticipating the, greater disposable income, greater amount of, demographic in the area. And, I think you were mentioning that even some of the residents were curious about, what are we doing? How can we get this moving forward to get more interest into the village over there? That's sort of like a good feeling. And also with you're tied into the MTA, and you're also mentioning that the MTA sort of ties the money they're giving to a station based on ridership, which makes sense. So if you're increasing ridership, you've got more MTA benefit. And you're also kind of like in a unique position over there where you've got the bus rapid transit, which is, between, Amityville and Babylon and Huntington, tied in with Steve Ballone's office to try to connect the train stations up and down, connect the Melville Employment Center. So Long Island has invested in double track, triple track. East Side Access is going to come online in, I think, 18 months or so. So we have been sort of preparing for this. But Peter, do you see, what do you see changes in the process going forward? What do you see, now that we're tying in, it's not just Amityville Village. It's a bus route that's that's going through, 2 townships and number of villages. There's the MTA going into the city. There's a lot involved here now. And so just, if you could just comment on that a little bit on, is that
Sure,
making?
because one of the big issues with development has always been traffic. And for best practices, now that you have Patchogue out there for 10 years, one of the issues that they are dealing with and responding to, as well as Huntington Village, is parking and traffic. So to have methods to get people in, and so once a village becomes attractive, most people on Long Island, if they don't live there, are going to drive there, which will then exacerbate a traffic problem or cause one. And so to get people to then say, okay, this is a hot village, I want to go there, but I'm willing to take some other transportation to get there, is really the next step of education that we have to have, because it seems to me that you can deal with the development itself and the traffic that it causes. So you can take the development and say, you need to have X amount of parking for your development so that you don't add to the problem by adding these units. Keep all your parking on site. But you become a victim of success at some point in time, manage your traffic problem. So the things that you're talking about are perfect for safe, fast travel. Somebody who lives in the EOD in Melville and wants to go to a particular restaurant in Amityville, that it's only going to take him 20 minutes to get there and 20 minutes to get back, about the same amount of time as it would take him to go by car. That's a perfect solution. We need a lot more of that, tying the region in. Think about New York City. You want to go someplace, you live on the Upper East Side, and you want to go to the Village, you know how to get there. It doesn't really take very long. Long Island needs that kind of capability to get from one place to another.
Right, gotcha. We touched before on the structural barriers, and we talked about the new lease percentages, and how do we deal with this? It seems like you know, we're sort of reacting to the legislation that's coming through, and it's not ultimately better for the renter, which is what you think that the reasons for this happening. Do we need to be bolstering out Long Island's footprint in Albany? I mean, like, what do we do to deal with these issues?
Well, Albany's allowed a certain amount of local rule on the decision to have rent stabilization and rent control. And I think in terms of the local rule, it'd be very difficult to find any Long Island entities. Maybe the Village of Hempstead would, but a whole bunch of other places say, no, we don't want this. We'd rather let the free market decide. The more units you build, the more competition there is. That's the traditional way to keep costs down and keep rents down, is to have choices. And if you want somebody to rent in your development, you're going to make it attractive for them to do so, not only in terms of the amenities, but also the rent. So, when you're 100,000 units under, you were mentioning, is there space for the EOD? With 100,000 units, there's space for pretty much any product that you could think about. You can gauge your product for the particular market segment you want to deal with, and you won't really budge the numbers much. How many units do we bring online a year? And I've been involved in a lot of really high profile projects. Chris, I'll ask you, do we bring overall 1,000 units on a year on Long Island? Maybe.
Yeah. And in some years we've brought under 1,000, right? And that's for an overall demographic of 3 million people, where, in the 70s, that number looked like 25,000 and 30,000, right? Yep. So I think that the home rule legislation for us on Long Island has so often been the Achilles heel, meaning, again, very powerful local civic groups can come out and oppose, and the local villages or townships are really under duress and political pressure to not approve some of these types of developments. In many ways, however, that can be an ace in the hole for us, because, and I'll point to Dennis, right? Dennis and the village of Amityville and the guys in there like Kevin Smith, those guys took a position that we are going to create an overlay district, right, in and around our downtown and train station. And that is going to create opportunities for a Land Tech, an Avalon Bay, or whoever is coming next, right? They have hundreds of units that are coming into their downtown. Now this is where I give Dennis the elevator pitch, right? It's a mature downtown in Suffolk County that has one of the best, if not the best, train duration time to Penn Station, right? You're a quick drive to the 110 corridor. It's a beautiful historic downtown, and you have an administration that is taking a leadership role in making these things happen, right? Before I left Avalon Bay, we were working with the city of Yonkers, right, where Mayor Spano had brought on thousands of units, right, and had more in the pipeline, right? Him on his own initiative and his administration's initiative was changing the character of the Yonkers waterfront. So from a Long Island perspective, we need to think about, how are we competing, right? How are we competing with our suburban peers in places like Jersey and Connecticut, right? There is flight right now that is coming out of the urban city center, where for years there was a reurbanization trend not only in New York, but also in DC, many of the major cities throughout the country. And now we're in a place where not only is there urban flight, but there's also economic flight from New York. We got the double whammy, because you're seeing many New York City developers that are going to Florida, going to Denver, going to tertiary markets like Nashville. And so you look at what's happening right now, our opportunity with home rule is to do exactly what Dennis did and Amityville did, and say, you know what? I see an opportunity to reposition a portion of my village or township for something with higher and better use, and something that's going to give me predictability with taxes in the future. And so I think if I'm an elected, and again, I look through rose-colored glasses, I'm the developer, but I think those are fantastic opportunities for us in some of the areas that we have here.
There are no pessimistic developers, by the way.
Yeah. I think that's a good point is, for our village, like looking for the future of what we have, and I speak about it with one of our other trustees a lot, is looking back at Amityville, say 20 years ago. And like I mentioned, a couple of these other developments that came in back then. And of course, everyone's like, oh no, change. Everyone is so scared of the change, but we need to kind of, embrace that change, and to survive, we have to change, and we have to, move on, think out of the box, and just make things work. And because we have to survive for years to come. It's not just about tomorrow or the next day. And we also want our kids to come back here. You're talking about Hoboken and other communities where there was a lot of flight. I know I have a lot of nephews and cousins that ended up moving to Hoboken and North Jersey and all that. You know why? Because it's still expensive to live there, but they have the city right there. In Amityville, we're looking at, like you said, the train ride is a 1 hour train ride. We also have a nonstop train that goes right in there. So we have a perfect opportunity here. And we have the 110 corridor where the people could live in here like they live in the city, where they don't need the cars. They could jump on the train and go. And we need to embrace that and make those changes. And you get some fight back from it, but you know what? Every once in a while you have to go with what you believe in, and sometimes go with past performances such as Patchogue and Bayshore and other communities that have done well, and take a little bit from them and mold it into your own community and make it work.
Well, that's the thing I find funny, actually, is that when people talk about change, they ignore the past 20 to 30 years. I grew up in Freeport. When I was a kid, Freeport had a vibrant downtown, which, by the time I was in high school, wasn't so vibrant anymore, and it's never really recovered. So people forget, when they talk about we don't want change, it's not as if the downtowns were doing well. The downtowns were doing miserably, which has an incredibly negative effect on the tax base. And that would result in foreclosed properties, closed properties, all sorts of things. And people need to understand not only the aesthetic, but the economic aspect of this. What does vibrancy bring? Vibrancy brings a lot of tax dollars, which make for a better community. The more taxes you can get paid, the better off you are. So you're bringing people, feet on the street, as you said. I mean, it's funny that people, when they cast their mind back, they seem to cast it back 30 or 40 years rather than the intervening.
Right. Yeah, even Patchogue. Patchogue was, sort of like the pinnacle of Suffolk County, probably 70, 80 years ago. And then it went into a decline, and now it's, resurged again. So Peter, that's an excellent point. It's where are we coming from? A lot of these places we're coming from a low point. And at Amityville Village, you've got a fantastic waterfront, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Beautiful waterfront. We have access to the barrier beaches. So that's another thing I'd like to look into down the road, is getting some type of ferry service from here. So not only having the train, you have the buses, and then you have a ferry service to bring people over to the beach. So that's, that's down the road. But I think that's another opportunity there too, for that transportation, where you don't need the cars.
Yeah. And soon, like I said, in about a year and a half, when the East Side Access kicks in, you'll have not only a clear shot to Penn Station, but to Grand Central Station in Midtown.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
flexibility as well. So, Chris, one thing you and I were talking about, which I think we need to, this is another area where the Real Estate Institute, I think we need to sort of pick this up and run with it going forward, is we need some effort on the before and after of what's going on. And I know from, so I'm on the Huntington Planning Board, and when Avalon was coming into Huntington Station, I was vice chairman of Huntington Economic Development Corporation. So I know a lot of how that was happening. I think that's the project, Peter, you were referencing before when Avalon came in the first time the old way, and then social media sort of killed it, and then came back in and had a success. But I remember
That's when Chris got his first gray hairs.
more than one from my recollection. I think I remember talking to Chris at like 2 o'clock in the morning some nights, getting answers for some stuff that were being posted. But anyway, the residents, were like, look, we hear you about the apartments, but we don't want to do the apartments first. We don't have the right retail here. We don't have a bank here. We don't even have a grocery, a national grocery store or regional grocery store here. We want to have that infrastructure put in first, then go get the apartments. And we're trying to explain to them that there's a balance between what you're spending, how much you're spending, and what you're spending it on, with what services are in the community. In order to change that, you've got to change the appetite and the habits of the people that are living there. So Avalon went in, opened up, and some other things that have happened is Eagle Rock, who was running a one of those older suburban garden apartments in Huntington Station, said, "Hey, look at what rents that Avalon's getting. They've got nicer rooms, some amenities, whatever." So they put millions of dollars into their garden apartment that now looks gorgeous. And then what's happened since then is the neighborhood that used to walk through, people now have done landscaping, their houses are in good repair. The prices of homes there have gone up. We've seen other developers come in and put in some other rental apartments. We've seen some retail also come in. There's an activity center there that the community wanted as well. But if you're listening to what we're saying now, you know about it. We should be coming out with something that looks at Patchogue, the before and after. What's the economic? What's the societal changes that are over there? What's the quality of life that is, that's changed for people?
It exists, David. It exists, and we've actually used it in more recent applications before IDAs and also before planning boards, but just showing what has happened in Patchogue, which is the best example because it's the most mature example. So that data is there. It's been around for about 7 or 8 years of data,
Okay.
and it's being brought now to show, again, mostly assessed value, which is the thing that it seems to me that taxing jurisdictions should be interested in. Everybody should be interested. Taxes are very high here. Have somebody else pick up some of the obligation to pay those taxes so that you end up paying less or your taxes don't go up. But that data is there in terms of overall economic benefit, that construction and the operation of that project. I mean, the interesting thing is that in the IDA side now, and I'm probably going to end up in the land use side also, you have to provide economic studies which show, first of all, that the project is feasible. Second, that the pilot benefit that you're getting is not just a boon to the developer without a commensurate benefit to the community. And third, just the economics. So yes, this project is needed. Yes, we're not getting too much in terms of economic benefits. And yes, by doing this project, this is what is placed on the economy of the locality. And having all that data makes it very difficult for somebody to say, well, I'm going to ignore all that. I don't want it anyway. And certainly the people who are the decision makers, when they're presented with all of that information, they find it kind of easy to say, okay, we'll discuss the aesthetics of the project, but the fact that it's needed, you've made your case.
Okay. I haven't seen that. So Peter, if you could, when we're offline, if you could send me the link or the file or whatever, that's something that along with the white paper that the Real Estate Institute did on the effects of school-age children by market rate apartment developments, where we showed that you needed 11 units to produce one school-age kid. So I think we need to sort of aggregate these and have a place that everybody can access this and use it, going forward. So let's jump to how e-commerce is changing. I know, Chris, you and I were talking a little bit where you had these, Amazon was coming in, they put in like these huge box stations so they don't have to go to people's apartments and leave it in front of the door. Lock boxes, I've now seen them inside on the newer developments. They're being put in there. Is there anything else you guys are accounting for or doing on that level?
Yeah, I mean, it's, there's been a few trends that have been going on in, multifamily development as far as, amenities. There's been an arms race with amenities in the city, that's for sure, over the last number of years, and how that's going to change moving forward is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But one of the things that we've been designing for more over the years, and certainly here at Heatherwood, is things like whether it's partial pending or Amazon lockers, right? And the technology is great. At the end of the day, you have a package that comes to your building, right? And I'll just use, our New York City buildings. For those of you out there who don't know, Heatherwood is a 70-year-old family-owned organization. We built our first apartment community in Port Jefferson in 1962. And then since then, we've built 25 apartment communities. We own them all. We're not merchant builders. We build and we operate for ourselves. But over the last decade or so, Doug Partridge has made a very strong move into New York City, Long Island City, in Brooklyn, pretty early on. And we just completed lease up on our 5th building in the city this month, which had been challenging, but nevertheless, there's still demand there despite all the doom and gloom. And at each one of our communities, the newer communities, we've introduced Amazon package lockers, and we're also retrofitting the other communities with package lockers, some interior, and in suburban communities, we're looking at opportunities for exterior lockers. You have conditioned opportunities as well. So from a technological standpoint, it's very interesting. You have your cell phone, you have a QR code. The code pops open the Amazon locker where your package is. You don't know which locker your package is in. So there is anonymity, and you pick up your package and you go to your apartment. It's very interesting technology. But then beyond that, there's also bulk delivery. So we are growing our back of the house package delivery storage, which is growing to in some cases almost the size of an apartment. So just to think of the volume that's coming through the door on a regular basis.
I'd like to ask Dennis the question though. So of the companies that want to come into the village of Amityville and start up a business there, are they all restaurants, or are you getting a variety of companies that still think that people value the in-person shopping experience? You're muted.
Dennis, you're muted.
Thought I was working on my phone though. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I was working off my phone, but yeah, most of them would be restaurants that want to come in, and we have a couple that are going to be coming in here now. We'd like to get a couple. We have a couple delis that have opened up and are looking to open up again. We did have a music venue that came in, and right now is hanging on a thread because of the COVID, but So it was, I guess, a mix. We had restaurants, we had the music venue, we had the delis. So it has been a combination of things. I'd like to see more retail coming in. That would be really nice. But maybe, once we get established more, they'll start coming in. So we're more than open to anybody coming in. I'm always, in the words of Ross Perot, I'm all ears. I'll listen to anything.
All right, we're gonna just touch one more topic because we actually have a bunch of viewer questions. So COVID-19 and COVID XX I have here, and whatever future COVIDs we have coming down the pike. What is that changing some of the designs, densities, layouts? Like, are you going to start adding, Chris, you're going to start adding like home offices in your rental apartments? Have you guys considered that yet? And what's the discussions been?
Yeah, no, I think that's the topic of the day, and we're having those conversations often on various communities here. So, Dave, it depends on the community and where we are. So, let's just talk about some of our suburban development out in Long Island. From a new development perspective, what we're looking at more is the expansion of exterior amenities, and whether that's exterior fitness offerings, covered areas. Those are some things that we're hearing a lot from our residents, and we did a corporate-wide customer survey to quantify what some of that demand is, and we got some very interesting feedback at our existing communities where we're looking at repositioning some of our clubhouses and courtyards. And one of the things that came back was that actual need for business-like WeWork space. Now, remember, some of our communities are of older vintage, Class B, built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So you have product that's 60, 50 years old. And in those areas, there aren't necessarily the extra room in the living, dining, kitchen area where people can set up for work very easily. So, one initiative that we have, which is coming down the pipe, is developing one of our clubhouses, which will now include WeWork-like space and gathering spaces, including some conference areas where those who don't have the ability in their homes can go to interior amenity space and sit down and do those things. So it's changing that. It's also changing the way that we're looking at our design, more so in the suburbs than in New York City, just based on land availability. But is there a desire now to have your own front door versus double loaded corridor, common entry? Is that going to be a driver in the future where there's going to be a disproportional demand for direct access or townhome type living versus what we think today is higher density suburban development, 4 stories, elevated. So we talk about that a lot internally these days, and what the right mix is on the land that we have.
Yeah. So Chris, I think, just putting on my planning department hat, if you took your clubhouse, you probably, I know in some of the areas you have the older, you sort of a single story or maybe double story. But you would think you wouldn't need to increase any parking ratio because it's the people in the community that are already parked there that are going to be using the WeWork type space. So maybe you might be able to go up a floor, with something like that without really invoking a new site plan, review. But yeah, no, that's.
Are you saying putting another story on my communities? I'd love to do that, Dave. I don't know that that may be a little more involved from a approval standpoint.
I thought you just got a pass, Chris. Go to it.
I'm saying from a parking thing, it's not like there's people coming from the outside to bring more cars. You can make the argument it's going to be the people that are already there. So obviously, if you go up a story, you're not taking up any more open space, and you don't need any open space for additional parking. But seems like that should be able to be worked out. Do we just one last thing? Do we think New York City is going to recover fully to where it was? Just
Yes.
quickly, each of you.
Several years, but it will.
Yes.
I think so. But I also think a lot of the big businesses are realizing they don't need to rent those big office spaces and people can work from home. So it's but New York is gonna bounce back from anything. It's the greatest city in the world, so it's gonna bounce back. Yes, it will.
Okay.
But definitely helping Long Island right now, give us a little bounce forward. So we're liking that.
Yeah, we certainly needed.
Yep.
All right, so we have some questions we're going to jump to. We have a few minutes left. Someone was asking about the Land Tech Group at County Line Road, 115 units.
Right.
Doesn't say specifically anything, but just said to ask you about it.
I can talk about that real quick. That was one of the first TOD projects that we had. That's where we, and obviously we did all our homework with that, finding out about the TOD before we went further, how beneficial it is to a village. And they are ready to have people come in on December 1st. They are complete now, and they are 1/3 full. They had their ribbon cutting a week ago, and at that time they were 1/3 full. And it's beautiful. You were talking about, Chris, you were talking about amenities and everything. They have a great workout room. They have a big lobby. They have rooftop patios that people can go to. They have a big green open space with fire pits and barbecues. You feel like you're at a resort when you're there. And they're doing a good job. You know, they're going to have, in their lobby, they have Super Bowl parties. They're going to have Monday Night Football parties. They're going to have this parties, different things. So it's a great, for the people that live there, it's going to be a really good thing. And it's probably 1/8 of a mile or 3 blocks, not even, from downtown, which is excellent. So that's our first, that was our first dive into the water of the TOD and multi-unit complexes. And it came out beautiful. We're getting nothing but great comments from the community about it. And we're very happy with that. So, and that also gave us a lot more leeway into the Avalon Bay project, because we can say now, like, this is here, this is what's going to happen at Avalon Bay. So, like we're saying, these little things help us out down the road with all the projects, and it's a great project. That's the REI.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the next question is an IDA question. It says, has there been ever clawbacks been enforced for lack of job creation? And I know in the old days there used to be the benefit up front, but I think now you don't really get the benefit until you actually create the job.
No, you get the benefit up front, and then there is clawback, and the clawback is not only the real estate taxes or the pilots, where you would have to bring your payment up to. So prospectively, you go back on the tax rolls. Retrospectively, they claw back the sales tax, mortgage tax, and pilot benefits that you received. Now, this doesn't really happen in the multifamily world, because multifamily doesn't really promise jobs. A lot of multifamily communities, there may be 5 jobs, something like that. The economics of multifamily is different than a manufacturing facility or another type of facility. But certainly on the non-multifamily side, there's been a lot of clawbacks. Companies merge and leave. Companies don't meet their employment requirements, and can't show a reason why. Then, for instance, COVID has affected everybody. So I don't think you're going to find a lot of clawbacks this year, because everybody understands what's going on. But in the normal year, and a lot of it's happened through mergers, where the company was doing fine on Long Island, get bought by somebody else, they closed down Long Island. Those companies pay clawbacks.
So there's a side to the IDA that on the tax side that people don't realize that's a negative as well, is you give up your your right to go back and get your taxes, adjusted down. So like we've seen, like the Lufthansa building over in East Meadow, had taxes were like $15 a square foot. And if they went in and tried to do a certiorari, they'd be in default to their IDA agreement. So they wound up paying in the later years of their benefit package term much more tax than they would have paid had they been able to challenge it, all along.
Well, technically, that's only when you have a fixed dollar pilot. So if you have a pilot that's based upon a percentage of the otherwise applicable taxes, you can bring a certiorari and have your pilot payments reduced. If you have a fixed payment pilot, you can do a certiorari because you don't want to come off your pilot and have taxes that are really out of whack, but you don't reduce your payments at all.
Yeah. Okay. There's a question here about from if people are willing to sell their homes and move into the apartments with the empty nesters, do we think that would help the situation here? And I'm going to answer this one. I think there's more and more awareness of the type of product is out there. I just recently viewed something called I think it's not Sutton Place. It's an Engel Berman type. I didn't realize they did just 55 and over, but it's beautiful. Has some of the workspace, not quite a WeWork type thing, but it does have a workspace area. But I wound up going there with my father-in-law. He had no idea anything like that even existed. So this would be an opportunity for him to sell his house, to have a younger family, move in the house, raise a family. So yes, I think that's a good thing. One of the things that's coming up here is accessory apartments. One of the questions is, how does that affect the whole mix by allowing more accessory apartments? So obviously you're not creating, developing new apartment complexes, but what's your guys' opinions on the accessory apartment?
I'll say from the municipality part of it, it's mixed emotions because we've been against that for years, wanting the two-family houses, in our residential areas and extra people on one piece of property. We have plenty of them in the village. Some of them might not be totally legal right now, but looking ahead, it probably isn't a bad idea because it can help people, with mortgage rates being high. It helps people, young couples even that, afford a home where they can have their accessory apartment, have somebody living there, or even these older people that, with taxes being as high as they are, being able to afford the taxes on their house just to survive by having that accessory apartment. So there's definitely a good positive for it. So it is something we have talked about amongst our, with the board. So it's, like I said, it's mixed emotions for me because I know that we also then you have this, if you have a big enough piece of property, I would have to say it could be beneficial. Right. Because there are some small pieces of property where it just wouldn't work at all. So that's the crucial part.
Right. Okay. There's another question on IDA, but I think how we're going to answer that is I'm going to pull Peter Curry in into a conversation about how do we get the IDAs presented better to the marketplace. Maybe it becomes a topic of one of our future symposium or a white paper or something, but certainly that needs help. So Peter, I'm going to lean on you at some future date.
And the IDAs are getting a lot more aggressive about marketing themselves and what they bring to the table. So they're doing a good job.
Last question that we're going to take is, has Long Island been able to benefit by the opportunity zones as far as multifamily developments?
None that I've been involved in. The opportunity zones are uh, they're set for a certain area, and those areas have other issues that are preventing development from going forward. And some of the opportunity zones are in the far eastern part of Brookhaven. I just don't think they're a natural place for significant multifamily development. So, it needs to be not only an opportunity zone, but the people who live there need to be able to go someplace to work, and these places are just out of the way. So it's not really working that much on Long Island.
Right. Okay. So with that, do any of my panelists here, do you have any closing statements you like to make or things to leave with our audience?
I would just like to thank you for having me here, and I appreciate all you're doing there, and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, I would say the
Dave,
same. Dennis, look forward to the opportunity to work with you at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dave, I'll say two things. One is, a little bit of a pitch for Heatherwood for our new community that, we're in the approval process of, which is Heatherwood Golf, an existing 18-hole community that we had closed down. We're repositioning for 200 units plus a 9-hole golf course. It's an incredibly unique opportunity on 347 in Setauket. There aren't that many multifamily players that own a golf course that they can reposition for something that, again, I think is going to be very unique on Long Island. And then the second thing is, for those real estate developers, retailers, brokers, investors out there, that are looking for a place to put their capital, I'm a big fan of Dennis's. So you guys, yeah, maybe mark some dollars in Amityville. You won't go wrong. It's on the great community.
Thanks for the.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, it was a pleasure working with you, Chris. And thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, our viewers.
And Margaret, for putting it together.
All right, good. All right, guys, we're signing off. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.